My colleagues, the Committee of the Whole has called to order. The Bill 40 was introduced prior to recess, and I introduced the panel guests for the record. To my immediate left is Steve Guerrero from the Office of Finance and Budget, the director. To my immediate right is Edith Pangilinan, the Deputy Director of Department Administration. And to her right is Daphne Simzu, the Director of Department of Revenue and Taxation. And they have brought their staff, Mr. Edmund Villanueva and Rudy Rosario from the Department of Administration. Questions for the panel? Questions for the panel will be asked in 2 rounds. 5-minute time limit per senator. Hopefully that would be sufficient, but if needed time we will extend that. Amendments must be submitted in writing via email to the clerk and distributed on the floor. Then after the Committee of the Whole has ended, the sponsor will close and will be making the motion to rise. That being said, I would begin with the sponsor, Senator Tello, if you want to start with the questions, and then we will proceed with any opening statement on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'd like to reserve my comments to the very end as the author of the bill and allow my colleagues to ask the questions first. And I appreciate the panel for being here this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Does any of my colleagues have any questions? Because I know there was questions that were risen. Senator Therese Terlai, I know you had some questions for DOA and maybe the Department of Revenue and Taxation. Ma'am? Oh, okay, we'll give you a minute. Does any other colleague would like to ask a question? And ask a question? If not, I'll even ask Senator Paris. Turn the mic.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. Did you want to suggest something first? I accidentally interrupted you, what you were saying.
I didn't understand that. Okay, did you want me to have the panel introduce them? I introduced them already, so if you want, they can speak about the bill.
Yes,
the advantage, if that's what you want, so that maybe that could answer some of the questions that my colleagues may have. Would that be sufficient, Senator Therese? I'll have the panels maybe explain their support or non-support of the bill. And I'll begin first with the Department of Revenue and Taxation before we lead to the Department of Administration would have to be the one that would open the account. Ms. Simmerson?
Half a day. Thank you, Senators. With regards to Bill 4035, basically what Bill 4035 would do, as per our reading, is that it would then require that the monies that are, or the revenues generated from wine sampling events be deposited into this alcoholic beverage compliance fees and fines fund. And that's basically what this particular bill does. But I guess one of the issues or questions that was brought up was with regards to the ABC, with regards to this fees and fines fund, actually, and maybe DOA can speak more on this about the creation of the fund, because I know there was earlier laws that addressed or that related to creation of this actual fund, right? But I believe DOA can speak on that maybe.
All right. Ms. Penglin, would you comment on the bill?
Good afternoon, thank you. I was just made aware that the intent of this bill for our part with DOA is to ensure that we manage the account, and it's a special account that, as you know, we are the gatekeepers of all the financial system of the government of Guam, so we want to ensure that all the fees that are being collected will be transmitted to DOA, to the Treasurer's Office. So that is the responsibility of DOA to ensure that that funding will be remitted to DOA. Sure.
Madam Speaker.
Sijus Masi, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank both Department of Administration and Department of Revenue and Taxation for being here this afternoon. When the question was brought up regarding the finances and the creation of the law, Public Law 31-199 was introduced almost 4 terms ago, and then Public Law 32-051 was introduced almost 3 terms ago, so 4 and 3 terms ago, and the implementation was to be able for the agency, if I'm saying this correctly, that the funds will not be commingled and be administered by the Department of Revenue and Taxation and the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board. Am I saying that correctly? So my question to both of you is, where is the fund at today? How much is in the fund? And has it moved anywhere since the inception of both laws?
So I can speak on what we've been doing at Rev and Tax.
Okay.
And thank you, Speaker. I'm not sure why the fund was not utilized before. At Rev and Tax, we actually began utilizing the fund September 5 this year, September 5, 2019. And although this particular bill deals directly with the wine sampling/tasting events, there's another section of the law. It's Section 3124.1, and it's in 11 GCA, so everything that's Rev and Tax is in 11 GCA, but it's in Chapter 3. And that section actually already refers to the Alcoholic Beverage Compliance Fees and Fines Fund, and it requires that the ABC card, the fees for the ABC cards be deposited into this account, the Fees and Fines Fund. And so we did begin utilizing this account again in September 5, 2019. So we're utilizing that account. We checked with Mr. Rosario from DOA, and so perhaps he can advise us on the amount that's in there, but we started using it, and we started actually, for those fees relating to ABC cards, depositing or utilizing that account, the account for the Fees and Fines Fund for those ABC cards. Now, what will change if this law is enacted is then these additional revenues from these wine tasting events or wine sampling/tasting events will then, the $25 fee plus the $50 expediting fee, those will then be part of the monies that will have to be diverted and put into this fund. So that's this bill. But already the agency began this year starting to use this fund.
So this bill will just clarify and make sure that nothing will be commingled, and it will go explicitly into this fund, the fees of the $25 and the expedited fees.
Right, that's what this bill does.
Bill will do. Will
Yes.
just clarify
Correct.
and make sure that it will go to its original intent and go into the specific fund that wasn't clarified.
Right, and the prior laws that happened, not 31-199, but 3250, I believe, 32051.
Yes.
So that one was what established our alcohol server training program. And at that time, when the alcohol server training program went into place, maybe around 2013 or so, so those monies were not being put into this fund, the ABC card monies, right? So there's and I'm sorry, because I know we've been talking about ABC, but this particular bill deals only with the wine tasting, but already there's a section of the law that requires that the monies for ABC cards be deposited into this fees and fines account.
And would that include the license classes and fees, like the manufacturing license, the agent license, the wholesale, and all that stuff? Or is it just specifically on the alcohol?
So this is specifically for alcohol beverage, and perhaps maybe Senator, or maybe I can ask somebody if they can make a copy of this for the body, because this will show you the section of the law that requires already for the ABC card fees to be deposited into this account. But I am grateful, though, for the body in terms of, I guess, putting this bill forward because it would allow for us, I believe there was an amendment to the bill to allow for us at Rev and Tax, or to allow for the administrator to direct the use of the funds in the absence of perhaps if we don't have quorum for the ABC board. And so that would be helpful to us because although we do not have a quorum issue now, my understanding is that we had many years where we did have issues with quorum. And so, you know, us being allowed to utilize the funds outside of or in the absence of there being quorum for the board will be helpful for our agency.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the update. And I guess on Department of Administration, what is the fund currently at right now? Yes, just.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker and Senators. My name is Goody Rosario. I'm the Deputy Financial Manager of the UA. Okay, as per our record, Fund the Alcohol Fund 667, which is the Alcohol Beverage Compliance Fees and Fines Fund, was established in our system since July 5th, 2013, as per Public Law 31-199. And it was I would say mid last fiscal year 2019 that I received inquiry from Revenue and Tax, what is the activities on this fund. So which I confirmed that there's no revenues coming in. So what I have asked Revenue and Tax is, please look into the the receipts so we can trace which account it's going to. So that was fixed mid fiscal year 2009. So for FY19, we have recorded 7,770 as collected revenues under alcohol, beverages, wine tasting. And then this revenue for FY20 from October to date, we have collected already 8,700. So at least now we know that revenues are in place. So with this bill and the other public law that the RT Director has mentioned, we can establish these two revenues, which is the alcohol training server account,
Right.
plus the compliance fees and fines. So they will be under same fund.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Treese?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here, the Deputy Director and Director from the agencies. Mr. Azar, it's very good to see you here, and so thanks to all of you. But okay, so the fund was established by law, but just the money was never really put into it until 2019, and so that's great to hear. If I could just follow up with a couple things. When the and the money's coming from ABC cards and now some other events, wine tastings and others. Does the Department of Revenue and Taxation just need to, how does it work when they notify DOA that they want to use this fund or that the ABC board has approved the use of the fund in a certain way? What does it take for them to use that? Because the funds are still managed by DOA, despite the law saying DRT, but I think all the funds are managed like this, right? So through DOA, what does the director have to do from Revenue and Taxation in order to physically get these funds to the place she wants them?
Yes, Senator. As part of the normal process, as this fund accumulates revenue collections, DRT can establish an appropriation account in which to be funded whatever is the available collection. Then,
Yeah. Like what we have, because we have one other revolving bank, like the examiner's driver's like examiner's fee. What we normally do is we request a financial statement from DOA, which we loaded that in our appropriation account through a modification request to BBMR, and so that we can spend that money once it's loaded in the appropriation account.
Okay, so you get a statement from DOA?
Yes.
And then you still have to run your proposed expenditures through BBMR for approval?
No, to load in the appropriation account. A modification request?
Modification?
Yes.
Okay. And then does DOA need to approve that, or they
No.
cut the checks?
Once BBMR loads the funds in the appropriation account, then we can spend it.
Who cuts the check?
DOA cuts the check.
All right. How long does it normally take then from a request to the end?
once goods and services are procured and once Department of Administration receive the invoice, it takes us 3 days for the invoice to be in the system. And then after that, I mean, we can pay it through our aging system.
All right. I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, the reason I'm asking these questions is because we have a lot of funds that are set up like this in the government, right? We intended them to be kind of like revolving funds where the agencies can have quick access, use them for their very specific purposes such as enforcement, regulation, especially. So it's good to hear the turnaround time is tight there. And do you find that, Ms. Shimizu, to be convenient? It's working as you think it was intended?
I mean, I think that the current process as it is, I'm not aware that there's any real large issues with it. Right?
Oh,
And so this is Edmund Villanueva, by the way. He's our Chief of Administration at DRT.
Great.
Yeah.
Mr.
if
Villanueva.
if the fund is being used for personnel, then 3 days is kind of tight. But for operational use, then 3 days is still okay.
Could you repeat that just a little louder?
Oh, right. Sorry. No, ma'am, no problem right now.
I'm just not hearing you.
Oh, the 3 days, like you mentioned, for them to cut the check, it takes about 2 to 3 days. Yeah, that's okay for 3 to.
You agree that it takes just about 3 days and that's working?
Actually, ma'am, it's not a cutting of the check, because see the numbers stay in the system. So when BBMR browse the system through the financial statement, they'll load the funding right away. There's no check being cut. It's just a transfer of money from the revenue account to the appropriation account. Right?
She's asking about the process could you,
Oh.
are you still having?
Chief Villanueva, if you can please just repeat what you were saying. Basically, what my colleagues are asking and the senator's asking is the process, the monies to put in the account, whatever it is, the process, we want to make sure it's very clear to my colleagues how this works today because of the intent of the bill.
Okay, the process, ma'am, is how we spend the money is that when the money is being deposited to what they call a revenue account, right? Once we reconcile that revenue account for that, let's say for the month of October, and then we send a request to BBMR to load that money into an appropriation account for us to spend it. Yeah. That's how the process in loading the fund.
All right. So is that operational account specific for this type of purpose, or is it your regular DRT operational account?
regular DLT operation account.
Oh, it goes into your overall operational account? So then,
No, no.
Oh, no, it's only for this purpose. Yeah.
okay,
And Senator, actually, Mr. Villanueva actually tracks our budget, and he tracks the funds, those expenses that are paid out of each fund separately. So we do track our monies separately from the various sources. Yeah.
okay, I'm curious, what do you find? They're the same? Your tracking and DOA's tracking as to how much revenue went into that fund? Because you're tracking it at the source of when they pay for ABC cards, right? Or when they apply, rather, because you're not doing the collections.
Right, it's the same. And actually, we haven't done a reconciliation of just the ABC cards, but our team did look back at what was received in FY19 when we just started, and Mr. Rosario did mention it was about $7,000 for last year, and our team confirmed to me earlier before I came here today that it was about $7,000. So I don't believe that there's an issue with regards to
great.
reconciling those amounts.
Okay, great. And what about the differing amounts that we receive as to how much to expect in this fund? I think your letter, or the letter from the Deputy Director at Department of Revenue and Taxation estimated about 40,000, but the OFB and BBMR are estimating 68 to 100 some $1,000. I think they said average 68.
Right. So with regards to the fiscal note, so I believe what you're referring to, Senator, is so the $40,000 annual projection was based on what we believe, and that was in the our testimony that was provided by Deputy Director Santos. And so that 40,000 was, I guess, a projection of how much we believe the ABC cards revenue would be in a year. And then with regards to the fiscal note, the financial impact that was provided, I believe that has to do with, that was actually the 160, are you referring to the 160 some thousand dollars? That actually is the cost, or what we were saying with regards to the impact, that would be the cost of additional compliance officers, which...
No, I'm sorry. I'm referring to, they estimate from FY16 that they received $115,000, and in FY17, $61,000. But you're only estimating for FY19 $40,000, so I'm just asking about that difference.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I would have to go back and look, but as Mr. Rosario mentioned, that just for the 1 month of October, for the first month of this fiscal year, we received $8,700 already into that account.
Okay, I'm just curious whether there was a trend of significant downward, receipts in this fund.
I think, Senator Therese, I think the director needs to explain that the ABC card is generated generally every 3 years, okay? In between those individual years, these are new applicants, and there's only a percentage that they collect. Then after the 3rd year, for my colleagues that are not aware of it, there's no requirement to go back to GCC or anywhere else to retrain. So when they do a renewal, it's the total amount of $60 that the department will receive, not reduced to 30. 30 is the first year. The 3rd and 4th, if I'm correct, the law does not change. Some may want to change it, but it doesn't change. ABC gets the full amount.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's very helpful information. So I think the only other thing I really want to know is, so for example, your most recent, you said you were able to utilize the funds. Was that pursuant to ABC board approval? And what did they say it would be used for?
I'm sorry, no, we haven't used the funds. We actually just began depositing money into this particular fund account this year, but we haven't utilized any of the monies.
Okay, thanks. So for prior years, this money has been incorporated and appropriated. Is that correct? By through some other mechanism.
In the prior years, when my understanding, and maybe DOA correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is in the prior years, because we hadn't been utilizing this particular fund, that the monies from the ABC card revenues was being deposited into the general fund.
Okay, so appropriated pursuant to our appropriations for the general fund. All right, so what about for FY 2020? What did we appropriate this amount? Maybe, we did not figure this amount into any of our projections?
This particular fund, Senator, was not utilized in estimating any revenues for FY 2020.
All right, great. So they can expect to receive the full amount, is what we're saying?
I would think that because this is a special fund designed specifically to augment the operation of revenue taxation, particularly the alcohol beverage tax division, that the funds generated in this particular fund would be utilized specifically for that purpose. Therefore, there was no need for an outright appropriation, simply because, as they explained earlier, as the funds are deposited into the fund, it gets deposited into the main fund, then transferred into an expense fund. They expend the fund out of that fund. It's recorded in the expense fund, so therefore it's not part of the regular annual appropriation. But it is money available to them for them to use.
All right, appreciate that. And then, I swear this will be my final question, is just, what do you intend to use these funds for? There's a kind of an array of uses, so I'm just curious your priorities, if the board has set any.
Actually, with regards to the actual use, I know that there's, within the bill, or within the law, there's several different potential uses, and this isn't something that I've talked with the board about. But as you know, Senator, and we've actually been working to try to ramp up our enforcement efforts, and there's definitely education that needs to be done as well, because we do see, for example, in our ABC side, we do see, for example, where people we do forfeitures of alcohol because of perhaps lack of education about what is or what can be brought into Guam through the U.S. Post Office, or what can even be brought to, or through the mail, or what can be brought to Guam in your suitcase or not. And so, we do forfeitures, and so I think one area we should work on, and of course I need to definitely go to our board on this because this ultimately is a board decision, but the education piece I think is going to be important. Of course, there's lots of areas that we do need more people. We could definitely use additional headcount in our area, but again, it will be dependent upon, of course, how much we actually end up receiving this account.
I want to commend you both, DR, the Revenue and Taxation, and Department of Administration for really, finding that and making sure that it worked as it was intended to, despite perhaps our legislature not having the exact language as is in other statutes, but I'm glad that you have made it work.
Thank you. Senator Castro, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a follow-up to the director, Daphne, if you can, just a follow-up. I was reading in the statute that the primary intent of the bill, prior to bills that became law that modified the statute, stipulated exactly that for education, training, and/or classroom. As a matter of fact, the statute even goes so far as to say it's to be outsourced to an approved not-for-profit entity. I think the intent at the time was to be GCC, UOG, or some other educational institution. But I heard a couple things that are curious to me. First, it's only recently that we started collecting the money and depositing it into this account. So could I just ask for the record, are you saying then that since 2013 to 2019, there is no recorded impact in the last 6 years in terms of the intent, meeting the intent of the law? So basically, it was an unfunded mandate since its inception, only up until 2019. Is that an accurate assessment on my part?
Well, the monies or the revenues generated from the ABC cards, they were not, and also from the wine tasting events, which is this particular bill refers to, those monies were not deposited into this special account since inception. We just began depositing them in this 2019. And with regards to the, I guess you did bring up, Senator, the the alcohol safety classes, we do work with GCC. Well, GCC and GHRA do actually provide those classes for so every single person who gets an ABC card, they must go through these classes that are offered by GCC and GHRA, and so we work with them. And before we issue any ABC cards, the certification or the certificate from those classes has to be provided to our team. So already, that has been in place. It's just I guess the actual payment or the putting of the monies into that account was not done. And with regards to those monies, the handout that the section of the law that I did ask for copies to be made of, which is 11 GCA, Chapter 3, Section 3124.1. That was actually added by Public Law 32-051. And you're correct that even though that the monies, as per the law, from these ABC cards was to be deposited into this fees and fines account, no, it was not being done so until, again, this year.
Well, even though I was kind of off the mark there, Mr. Chairman, I think it's comforting to note that there is an approved curriculum. Is that what you're saying? That so GCC and or DRT have an approved curriculum that's being administered for the purposes of issuing alcohol at these approved places?
Yes, GHRA, generally GHRA, I think they usually do them for the hotels, but GCC also, they do hold classes as well. So when people do come and they want to get a card, we advise them that they have to go through these classes, and we let them know where they are available.
Okay, and then I guess I'll leave this for the respective committee chair and my colleague who's the prime sponsor of the bill, but I'd like to have another discussion on not just the fiscal impact, but the overall impact of the programs. I read a prior body's committee report, Mr. Chairman, in 2013 that established that of 600 arrests, for example, at least 50% of those were related to the consumption of alcohol. And so as a teacher, I'm sure many of us educators would like to know if that program is having an impact. I'm sure it's not the only program. As a matter of fact, there are federal programs that this attempts to supplement. So I'm just curious, in the grand scheme of things, are we seeing less arrests, less instances in the community that are associated with alcohol consumption? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Does any of my colleague have any question? Senator Paris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for everyone that has come here today for the committee in the whole. I just have a question regarding the placement of the language in the bill that's before us. So the bill basically addresses non-recurring fees and expedited fees to be placed in a special fund. It's called the Alcoholic Beverage Compliance Fees and Fines Fund. So from my understanding, there's no mention of the fines or the ABC card fees. So how would this bill affect that ability to collect those other fines and fees? Will it have an impact on that?
Thank you, Senator, for asking that question. So with regards to this particular bill really only addresses these wine sampling and tasting events. And I actually went back to my team just to confirm exactly what is a wine sampling and tasting. And, is it wine tasting as we see, for example, they have these large events that, perhaps a large organization or corporate would have, but it's not those. These are purely wine sampling events. So like if you may go to a grocery store, I don't know if grocery stores or perhaps maybe wine distributors may have an actual sampling. This is limited just to a 1 ounce. And this particular bill only addresses that and has no impact on the prior law, which was already, which was enacted back in 2013 and was codified, and already it's in section 3124.1, which was handed out earlier. They're totally separate.
Okay, thank you. The other question, if I heard correctly, that in the years that this was implemented, the monies were not utilized for compliance issues. Is there a potential for DRT to recoup those monies to go towards compliance? This is a question perhaps for OFB or DRT.
I would recommend that DRT answer that so they can identify how much was collected then, and DOA respond is that, do they have the ability to replenish the funds that were collected? Because like they mentioned earlier, there was no money deposited. Every penny that goes into the general fund is appropriated out. So the question would be, does the money still exist? They would have to answer that. I wouldn't be able to answer that because that was prior to me being the oversight on appropriation. Maybe DRT can identify how much was collected then, and DOA can answer if there's even months to collect, to give back.
Really, at this point, our focus really has been prospective. Our focus hasn't been trying to go back. Because really, this is the first time we're really actually looking and actually utilizing that separate account. And in fact, our team actually was really excited that we really actually have something that was found and that was identified that we can utilize as a source. But really, we've really been looking at this perspective. Of course, again, this will have to be brought and discussed with the board. I not discussed this with the board, but it's something, because our board meets bi-weekly, that will, perhaps put that on the agenda so we make sure that we share this with them and perhaps determine what the priorities of the board are. But again, the way that we've been looking at this time is really prospective.
Thank you very much. The other thing that I want to address is how the funds are being processed. So it goes through, in a way, a non-appropriation process. It gets deposited into an account. Are there any shortfalls, or you think that needs to be addressed additionally in how the money gets appropriated?
I think DRT can explain that it starts with a receipt, and the receipt identifies the account, then it goes through that process.
When the money is collected, by our compliance inspector, the money gets deposited to Treasurer Guam in a revenue account, right? And then after that, like I said, we reconcile through a financial statement given to us by DOA, and then we send that financial statement together with a request to be loaded to our appropriation account, which is established by DOA too, and then so that we can spend the money.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, and Senator, thank you, excuse me. And just to further clarify, we actually, at each of our branches, we do have a list of all of the revenue accounts that are associated with the fees or fines or any other collections that we have. And so that revenue account number is actually the mechanism for Treasurer of Guam being able to identify or determine what account that monies is going to be deposited into, or where that monies are going to go. Does that help also with answering some of your questions?
Yes, thank you. There's also an amendment that I would like to proffer, and I don't know if this is feasible for Department of Administration. So if I could just read it. And so it's basically requiring the Department of Administration to furnish a quarterly report to Imagahagan Guahan and Legislature Guahan of the condition and a detailed description of financial activity within the fund. And the Director of Department of Administration shall create an annual report as well, an itemized annual report.
I would recommend, the panel could barely hear you, Senator Perez, but if you do have an amendment that you're recommending, I have no problem, but if we can get it printed so we can circulate and everybody can see what you're proffering. But I kind of heard pretty much what you're asking for is so that the Department of Administration will provide a report so that everybody the department will know what they've generated in all the funds. I think that's generally what you're asking for.
Right, if it's feasible, it's
Yes.
something that's feasible.
It's always feasible for them to print a report. Yes. Do you have anything else further?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Senator Kelly Mars Taito.
Sainamasi, Mr. Chair. So I have just a couple of questions. Most of the others have been addressed already. And thank you all for appearing here to clarify things for us. So in looking at what's already been in the law, it mentions, as Director Shimizu had said, that there are a variety of programs and goals for this fund. So with that, could you outline the processes, and this may have to be speculative since this is now the time that money's being collected, it may not have been spent or gone through a process yet. But how do you envision that some of the money would be used for enforcement?
Thank you, Senator. With regard, and again, this is somewhat speculative, I suppose, but with regards to what our plans are at Rev and Tax, you know, we've been working to try to ramp up our enforcement in all areas. Our ABC, or our compliance group, they not only enforce on alcohol and tobacco, they now will also be enforcing on cannabis. They also assist our business license group when there are issues with regards to licenses. So anytime that there is a formal complaint made and it's necessary for our team to go out and to revoke a license or to make an inspection to revoke a license, that team goes out. These funds obviously are really specific to alcohol, but I mean, in the area of enforcement, our team is definitely in need of additional assistance. For this year, I believe we had actually proposed to hire additional 4 inspectors. You know, and again, our mandate is collections and enforcement. I'm sorry, collections and enforcement. So we not only are the collection arm for the general fund, for the majority of the general fund, we're also an enforcement arm. And I think, you know, one of our goals is to really change the face of enforcement for our team, and so that way we're truly recognized as enforcers. We've been working with other agencies to do multi-agency operations for enforcement, and you know, of course, those take money, they take time, we incur overtime. We don't have the same type of laws that govern us that the usual law enforcement have. So those monies will definitely, you know, be able to be utilized in that area.
Sainamasi Pere, for that information. That helps me understand that the money could potentially be going for additional assistance, maybe paying for the needed overtime or other such matters that are part of the enforcement work that the Department of Revenue and Tax does. The other elements that are listed here are public service announcements, promoting responsible drinking and driving practices, youth programs, education, and also interestingly to me maybe, the Alcohol Beverage Control Board and administrative meetings. But focusing on the middle portion there, where it's talking about youth programs, responsible drinking and driving practices, public service, has anyone thought about how that process would work?
And so in the last few months, I've actually been working with both DYA and GPD. And we've been really working, of course, to address the issue of underage drinking. And so, yes, we've actually become more active. Again, like I mentioned, we've been working on multi-agency operations, various. That's one of them. It is very important for us that we address the issue of underage drinking, and of course of drinking while driving, which Senator Castro also brought up earlier. So, you know, again, we're still in kind of the infancy stages. You know, I've been there since January. But since we've been there, I'm really proud of what our team has done. You know, we've been working on enforcement for B&Bs. We issued our first notices of violation for B&Bs this year. We have, and our team has really, I think, done a great job going out. And I think, you know, even just in these last few weeks, we've been doing some inspections as well of businesses. So, you know, again, all of these monies will be used I am confident will be used for a good purpose, and most especially because I'm confident in our board. We have a good board. They are diligent at meeting every other week. I've been on government boards, and I'll tell you it's even difficult to go to a monthly board meeting. We have a board that actually meets every other week. So, they're really great, and it takes a lot of commitment for them to do that. So I'm confident that they will, be very diligent in ensuring that the monies are utilized properly. But I know that our team also has great ideas about, the recommendations that they'll be giving to the board as well for the use. But yes, like I mentioned, the issue of youth drinking is definitely something that has been brought to our team's attention, and that's something that we've been actively in communication with both DYA and GPD on.
Senator Maasi, it's very good to hear about the activity, how things along this program really do seem to be shaping up. It's important to hear of your multi-agency approach. That makes a lot of sense, and that is, again, helpful to understand, because obviously for Department of Revenue and Taxation, something like a youth education is outside of the realm of expertise. But in partnering with the Department of Youth Affairs, the Guam Police Department, maybe even some additional partners in the future with the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, people who have that expertise. And so then I see that it creates a very fruitful partnership and really allows you to provide your expertise, but then partnering with theirs as well. So those are important to hear. And again, thank you for sharing those. And for the last part, so again, this may be just in the discussion stage. Has there been any thought or discussion how the monies might be used towards the board or administrative meetings, if at all?
I believe that our board does get stipends, but we've been operating for the past however long that this fund has been created, utilizing our appropriated funds. So again, this is not, that part hasn't been discussed at all. Really, honestly, our main focus has been really enforcement, and again, ramping up our enforcement, of course, addressing social issues where they're related, and working with the relevant agencies to make sure that you're right, that the technical expertise that because we are not the technical experts in that, in those areas. Public health is another great resource that we've been utilizing as well when it comes to, for example, tobacco and use of tobacco vape products by minors. So, we do work with our other agencies, and I'm grateful that our other directors have been very receptive and very helpful and very willing to work. Again, our team calls them multi-agency operations, and so I'm grateful for that, but thank you.
Thank you for that. Again, it's important to be able to hear in the thinking, and it really, I think, shows a lot of progressiveness on the part of the Department of Revenue and Taxation that so much has shaped up. It sounds like there's been a lot of discussion. It is very commendable that the board is meeting every other week. I've sat on boards before, and I know that they demand a lot of commitment, and so meeting every other week is quite a commitment, and so we really appreciate their diligence for the community. Thank you for those answers.
Thank you. Does any other colleague have anything to be brought up before I ask the sponsor? Senator Lee, ma'am.
Sujus Masi, Mr. Chair, and thank you all so much for being here. Just a few quick questions I think that Director Shimizu will be able to answer for us, and I apologize if you've already responded to questions similar to this, but just wanted to clarify, is this fund separate and apart from the funds that, apart from your general fund?
Yes, this is a totally separate fund.
Okay, and when was this fund established?
As per DOA, it was established back in 2013.
Okay. I'm looking at, Mr. Chair, I'm just looking at page 1, line 13 of the bill, and it says, "La Legislature finds that the fund has yet to be established." And so I'm just thinking that we might want to reconsider that language, maybe in an amendment, striking it. And can we just confirm the amount that was collected over the past year? Was it 7,800? Or was it 8,700?
In fiscal year 19, it was $7,770. And in fiscal year 20, just for the 1 month, was $8,700.
Huh, okay. So between $7,000 and $8,000 is what you've collected. And just for comparison's sake, Daphne, what's the amount of your appropriation?
I believe that our total appropriation is in the about 14 million.
14 million.
Our total general fund appropriation, our budget for FY 2020.
In your reading of this bill, Ms. Shimizu, is there anything that this bill authorizes that you're maybe not already doing?
I'm sorry, Senator.
No, it's okay.
Would you mind repeating that?
Sure. So in your reading of this bill, is there anything that this bill does or authorizes that DRT isn't already doing?
So this particular bill actually addresses the fees that is collected for these wine sampling/tasting events,
Right.
which currently is not by law required to be deposited into this account. So this particular bill is really specific to that those revenues.
And just correct me if I'm wrong, the amount from those revenues is about $8,000 a year.
So I'm actually not sure how much the revenues are, the annual revenues are. The revenues that we've been depositing into the account so far since September 2019, they're likely all the ABC card fees, which is actually $30 per person. So that's what has been deposited already. These ones are
So
kind
we're
of...
talking about a potential fraction of the $8,000 or $7,000. Is that correct? Not the whole thing.
So, right. So already the section 3124.1 of the code already requires that those ABC card monies, revenues be deposited into the fund. Now this particular bill would require that the wine tasting, which is the non-recurring fee of $25 per event, and then the $50 expediting fee, that these be deposited into this account as well. That's what this particular bill would do.
Right. And so in your estimation, what would that be?
I was asking my team if they could come up with an amount, and at this time I really don't have an amount.
But it wouldn't be the full $8,000, is that correct?
No.
Okay. In terms of reporting, would this be reported under the special revenue fund report that comes to us monthly?
Yes, so it would be in
Because
the
I would
special.
hate to put an additional reporting requirement on you if this is already coming to us monthly.
Right, and that special revenue fund actually, is actually generated by BBMR. So anyway, but yes, I believe that this will be included in the special revenue fund report.
And Director Shimizu, what would be your take in terms of, we're already limiting the use of these monies to programs that may include but are not limited to enforcement, public service announcements, promoting responsible drinking and driving practices, youth programs, education, and ABC control board and administrative meetings. Is that correct?
Right, that's already in the law, yes, Senator.
Right. Do you think, I'm just trying to give you as much leeway as possible. We're not talking about, a huge amount of money here. And so if we were to restrict the use of the money to those programs, I just want to make sure that it doesn't require an additional board approval on top of it. I want you to be able to use it for these programs and be able to get the money where you need it as soon as possible without having to wait. I know you said your board meets monthly.
Our board meetings, I was saying bi-weekly, but I think they're twice a month.
Twice a month. Do you have any issues with quorum ever?
At this time, we haven't, but I was checking with our team. There was actually years or periods where we really did have an issue, and we've had to postpone meetings. So there was times there were. We don't contemplate that right now we will, but you never know, depending on the board. We did have, for example, one board member who was deployed, and so she was gone for a while. And then, of course, there are other things that happen with regards to boards, or board members,
Right.
which may cause them not to be able to be at a board meeting, and which may cause a quorum issue.
Well, I'm glad that that's not an issue now, but I'm just, again, trying to look ahead and just see and give you folks the maximum flexibility, especially because it's already kind of dictated that the money should only be used for these programs. So that's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair. But again, I just, we're focusing a lot of time and effort, and it's less than $8,000. Just want to put that on the record. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right. Before I get to you, I'll have Senator Pt.2 speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions regarding protocols. Who would be the administrator to distribute this money, and what are the protocols? If anybody's requesting to support a program under this particular bill, where does it go? The request goes to the legislature, or the request go to the Department of Administration? Who is the managing distributor of this particular funding for the use of the programs that are on this bill?
Our ABC board.
The ABC board is the administrator to distribute the money?
The ABC board will be the ones to determine the use of the funds.
So let's say, for example, that a particular organization that is authorized to get money from this particular funding, do they go to the ABC board, or do they go to the Department of Administration, or do they go to Revenue and Tax?
The ABC board actually falls under our umbrella, and so with regards to like the daily support staff and operations, because the board only meets an hour or so twice a month, so the daily operations and other things, if there's any inquiries or questions, or if there's any processing that has to be done, those will all be done by the Rev and Tax team, the ABC team, or our compliance team.
Because my understanding is that this funding would go to the Treasury Department, right? So if, for example, one of the senators here would like to fund a particular program, so all we need to do is go to the ABC board? Where do we go?
I think maybe the director can actually explain that, number one, this fund was intended for ABC to help the enforcement. It was not intended to fund nonprofit organizations.
Yes.
Okay, ma'am?
Would you like me to?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Senator, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. Just based on Public Law 31-199, I'll rise to that inquiry. Monies collected from the assessment of fees, all monies collected for the non-reoccurring fee and/or expedited processing fee shall be deposited into that separate account called the Compliance Fee and Fines Fund. The administrator, with the board's approval, shall be authorized to use the monies collected for programs to promote compliance with liquor laws, business development and improvement of interagency and inter-office functions. Such program may include but are not limited to enforcement, public service announcements, promoting responsible drinking and driving practices, youth programs, education, and alcoholic beverage control board and administrative meetings. Public Law 31-199.
Does that answer that, Senator Turley?
Yes, it does, but the thing is, this allocation of funds is not only for the use of whatever revenue and taxation need to enforce the collection and the training the training that is needed, and it goes beyond. It's clearly enunciated on Bill 31 that some of these funds can be used not for private organizations, but also for the use of the government. It's clearly enunciated that it's not only focused to be used by revenue and taxation on, as far as training employees and all those things. So I just need clarification on that one.
All right. Thank you, Senator Chalai. Before I get to Senator Tyree, Senator Castro waved his hand. Did you still want to do the point of
I
entry?
just
or-
wanted to raise a point of inquiry earlier,
Yes.
but I let the
Inquiry.
prior speaker finish. Could you just clarify for me if Fund 667 is the fund account for Section 3124 of the title, or is Fund 667 relative to Section 3229, which addresses the wine tasting and...
You're specifically to the account number.
Well, it was referenced earlier, so
Right. Okay.
it's been stated that the account was established. I'm just trying to clarify, was the account
Yes.
for the larger 3124, as the director has referenced 3 or 4 times, or is 667 the fund for this, what the bill is attempting to do? So if you have an answer, then I have a follow-up.
Yes, Senator. Fund 667 in our system, it's called Alcohol Beverage Compliance Fees and Fines. And that has been established since July 5th, 2013, per Public Law 31-199, Section 2.
So, thank you. So that's appropriate. Mr. Chairman, with that said, I believe, unless the prime author wants to correct me or anybody else with other information, that the intent of the bill is to establish even a separate fund, separate and apart from that one, that's specifically referring to Section 3229 of Article 2, Chapter 3, Title 11. I just want to make sure we're clear on that, because in the legislative findings and intent, it says the fund has yet to be established, and I think that's an accurate statement based on what I just heard. That's the first point of inquiry, and I'm satisfied with the response, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. But I do have a follow-up question for Rev and Tax. This was authored by the acting director at the time, and it's a pretty straightforward question, Director, or Mr. Chairman, let me speak, direct it to you. Is DRT in favor of the bill?
Yeah.
I read the committee report and the recommendations to further amend the bill to conform with whatever it is you raised at the public hearing. So it's a straightforward question. Are they in favor of the bill? And I have 2 follow-up questions. What does it mean that DOA may not allow DRT to establish a separate fund account? And the second part would be, do you still believe, based on the submitted testimony, that it would prohibit the administrator from spending the said funds without prior ABC board approval? Because it's my opinion that there's full latitude to expend those funds even within a restricted account of within 3229, as long as you meet the provisions of that section, which is primarily educational and nothing to do with operations and administration, unless it's in support of the board meetings that will help promulgate that. So I just want to make that clear. So that's probably one question and 2 points of follow-up to your letter.
Oh, well, with regards to the bill itself, I know you were referring to our testimony, or the testimony of Acting Director Santos at the time. The 2 points that were brought up, with regards to the issue on whether or not we thought it would be important for us to be able to have access to the funds, or to be able to have the authority to act outside of the board. We thought that was very important, and that's why we did mention that in our testimony. With regards to the creation of the account, I'm not sure. I think that, as we researched it more and more, we actually found that there were accounts created, and in fact, there is a wine tasting account. So there's not only a wine tasting account, but there is also another account, which is the fees and fines account. And so I've been looking at those with our team at the system and doing some more research, and we found that there is a there is a wine tasting account, right?
Yeah, under this fund, there's a wine tasting revenue account.
In the interest of those who may come back and follow up on this account and this bill, right? Usually senators have a propensity to come back and follow up on something they introduced. Could you just, for the record, tell me what the number of that account is? Not that I will personally ever look it up, but I think it's important to state, since you gave me 667, this wine tasting account, I'm assuming it has a number for itself.
Yeah, under the fund, there's two revenues that are currently established, which is alcohol beverage wine tasting. That's 3667-60801 as a revenue account number. And the other one is 3667-60802 as wine tasting expedited fee.
Mr. Chairman, that satisfies all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now, you're going to ask a question? Because I was going to leave
Thank you,
it to
Mr. Chair.
last.
Actually,
Okay.
since we're going on round two,
Yes.
I guess I'll take the advantage of being able to go to round two and this be my first round in case, as we move on. But I know that one of my other colleagues has a question to ask too, so I appreciate allowing me to go ahead and speak on it. Again, I appreciate Daphne and DOA for being here this afternoon to talk on this bill. And, you know, even though my Goody, you said earlier that the account drew in $8,000 just for the month of October. So it's not just $8,000 as mentioned earlier by the senator from Tumon, that it just says measly $8,000 is nothing. Actually, this account could generate close to over $100,000. Is that true?
That's very possible, Senator.
Okay, and even BBMR stipulated in their report as well that it could even go as close to 165 plus with the amount. So Daphne and DOA, let's start from the beginning of this. Okay, so let's start from the beginning of this bill. Is there something you guys want to talk? It's okay. I'll pause while you. Okay, are you ready? Okay, so let's start from the beginning of this. Okay, in Bill 31 earlier, Senator Rodriguez introduced a bill that we all been referencing, and that bill was public law, turned into Public Law 31-199, correct? And in Bill 40, what Bill 40 does is just, it's duplicate from the law, but in this section where it's underlined, the underline creates the account. It creates the alcohol beverage control, the alcohol beverage compliance fees and fine fund. In Public Law 31-199, when it was passed into law, it didn't create the account by law. It referenced the account. So if you were to go back to 31-199, which I think you have a copy up there, can you show me anywhere in that current law that creates the account? It references an account, but it doesn't create it by law. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up to you is because it was brought to my attention by the Department of Revenue and Taxation that this account was never created by law, legally. So that's all what I was doing, was to ensure that the alcohol compliance fees and fines is hereby created separate and apart from all other funds of the government of Guam. So it's clear that it's created. It's not just referenced in Public Law 31-119. Goody, you are very familiar with laws that create special fund accounts. And if you reviewed Public Law 31-199, Does it create the account in this law?
Senator, I need to go back to the particular law because based on our system, we created the fund. So that means our staff had reviewed the public law and they think it has to be established. But
Okay.
we will make that
Fair.
clarification.
Yes, fair. That's fair enough. So I do appreciate if you had the opportunity to really read Public Law 31-1199, because I have the bill in front of me, or the public law in front of me, and I don't see anywhere here that it creates it. It just references it here, where it says, page 5, monies collected from assessment of fees, all monies collected from the non-recurring fees and/or the expedited process fee shall be deposited into a separate account called the Alcoholic Beverage Compliance Fees and Fines Fund. The administrator of the board approval shall be authorized to use the money collected in the programs to promote compliance with liquor laws, business development, and improvement in integrity of inter-office functions. But what my bill does is make an amendment to actually say it is hereby created, separate and apart, this account. Now, earlier you referenced there are other accounts, the wine tasting accounts, the other accounts. There's all kinds of accounts where money comes in, and of course they're assigned to different funds there. But this particular bill was focusing on wine tasting events and spirit events, that all the funds generated through the license of this would go into this fund. So that's 31-199. My question here is, how can you guys, DOA can create any fund they want to without legislative approval? Maybe that question. So can DOA create any fund they want, call it whatever you want, and create the fund without legislative approval?
Senator Tello, I'm just going to make a very quick comment that maybe some of my colleagues may not agree that I do. But as you read on your page 5, on your bill, Public Law 31-199, exactly what you're saying is why they created the fund. It says to create it. It's in law. So to ask the Department of Administration to say they create the fund without any legislature's authorization, I don't believe they even have the authority to open an account for something that it's not authorized or directed by law.
Okay.
Okay, so I would just try to redirect your question more
so my
specific because
question
it's
is-
in the law.
So my question is, they said earlier they opened an account just this September 2019. And what was you're calling it the what account, and now you're putting all the money into that account?
Now, just to correct that, Senator, the September 2019 activity is just the realization that there should be revenues to be recorded in this fund. It's not that we just created it last September. This has been created since 2013, as per our understanding that per Public Law 31-199. And Department of Administration doesn't establish any fund without authorized law.
So, Goody, so looking at the Bill 40, which is clear and precise that this fund is hereby created and separate and apart from all other funds of the government of Guam. That language was not in 31-199, correct?
Senator Tello, I'll provide this copy to DOA, and they can read the same thing I read earlier.
Okay,
Okay, so that they can respond.
okay.
But I think
So what I'm trying to get here is that I was told that this we needed to create the fund. It needs to be created in order for DRT to be able to utilize this funding. Now, later on, another bill was created a year later, 32-055, I think it is, and it also created these schedule of fees. And as well, in that particular bill, it mentions again the Alcohol Beverage Compliance Fees and Fines Fund. Again, that these schedule of fees shall be deposited into the fund. And this is on page 5 of Public Law 32-51, actually. And on page 6 and 7, it has all these fees: manufacturing license, 100 per year; agent's license, 250. You're familiar with that? You mentioned it, Public Law 32-51. All those fees that are on the pages 6 and 7 of that public law shows all these fees, and that also is said to go into this fund. Is that correct? Daphne?
The only fees currently going into that account are the ABC card fees, which is $30 per
Mr.
card.
Chair, I have the public law here, 32-51. Can I have 1 minute so I can show the good director from GRT?
We have a recess. My colleagues, we are back from recess. Senator Tello, you are still
Thank you.
recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity that a lot of things were covered for myself as well as my colleagues too. And I'd just like a comment from DOA, who ones who create these accounts. So Bill 40, so what is your interpretation of this bill, and do you think DOA needs this bill?
Okay, thank you, Senator. This bill, we wholeheartedly support because we are the, again, gatekeeper of all the funds with the government of Guam, and we will give the assurance that this shall not be commingled because it's a special fund established for its main purpose as indicated in the law. So the fund is not to be commingled. That is how it stands with DOA.
Thank you. And revenue tax, it was mentioned earlier something about, the spending of this fund, that it needs the approval of the board. Do you still feel that the approval of this expenditures of this funding, this source of funding, should still stay with the board as well as the department?
Our ABC group, we do have an ABC board that governs, and by law, the ABC board is really the governing body. They make the decisions on that area, so absolutely. With regards to our comments in our testimony from July 16, 2019, our concerns about the administrator, who is really the DRT director, not having access to the funds, that was really in the event that there was no quorum. And again, I believe I mentioned earlier, although we are not having any issues with quorum currently, there were periods where we did, and so this would allow for us to be able to have access to the funds in the event that there is no quorum for whatever reason. So that's, again, thank you for addressing that issue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I had all my questions asked for now. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Therese.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple amendments that I'm putting off until later, but for the panel that is here, to save some time, I just wanted to ask one more question. So when I asked you earlier about what you would use this money for, what has been the sentiment of the board, its priority, and you mentioned the forfeiture on importation, that there were, making sure that you get compliance in that area, and I'm sure you have many other priorities. But I wanted to ask, is there anything that you have planned for some immediate relief for, we're seeing in the schools additional, people the kids, they're drinking, and some of these town hall meetings that we go to, they say, these, the residents are telling us, we know where they're getting their alcohol. They're getting it from the mom and pop stores. I can tell you where. We know the bus stops that are nearby where they drink it. Things like this. So I'm not sure. I just wanted to know if this has got to your level, if you have any plans that kind of directly address that issue.
Thank you, Senator, for mentioning that. We actually, as I mentioned earlier when Senator Marsh had questions, we've been engaging in several multi-agency operations, and we have been in direct communication with DOA Director and Deputy Director, the Chief of Police as well, Chief Ignacio, to address the issue of underage drinking. And so absolutely, that's at the forefront. That's one of the larger issues. And of course, anytime, we monitor also the news, and when we hear that there is a possibility that there are retail establishments that are that may be selling to minors, that is absolutely a concern of ours. And so our team has been very diligent. Our team has been aware, and that's been on our radar. So I mean, in terms of addressing those are absolutely at the forefront of what we're doing. That's why it's very important that our team is that we get additional, or that we get funding that we need for our team, so we can go out and do these things. Because in the end, it's not just about regulating for regulation's sake. It's really about enforcement, and ultimately so that we can keep our people safe, and most especially when minors are involved. So that's absolutely something that's very serious, and that has been a very serious issue that we've been dealing with. And absolutely, we've been dealing with and working very well with Chief Ignacio, and also with DYAA Director Lonnie Brennan, and also Crisinda Uggan. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you for your assistance here today and for your efforts in that regard. Pt.2.
Senator Pt.2.
I know that the chairman is actually getting ready to release the panel, but before they leave, I want to thank each and every one of you for just satisfying my questions, and both the Director of Revenue and Taxation and Mrs. Pangilinan, thank you very much. Good job, and continue working for our people. Thank you very much.
Pt.2, Senator.
There being no further question, I will now Senator Marsh Tino, yes, ma'am.
You almost got your 5 minutes. But I just have a real quick question, actually. To provide background information for some of the amendments that have been proposed, I just wanted to ask if you could outline what the typical reporting requirements are for the Department of Revenue and Tax. So a couple of the amendments are asking for, one is asking for an itemized annual report and a quarterly report. And so I'm just wanting to be able to weigh out what type of reporting the Department of the Department of Revenue and Taxation is doing for a fund such as this.
Actually, Senator, with regards to the special funds, that reporting is not a function of revenue tax. Yeah, and so I will defer to DOA on those questions.
Yes, Senator. With the itemized annual report and quarterly report for this particular fund, we will submit a detailed revenue report as well as expenditure report. All the details are normally in that report. So everything is reported, and if there's any question, we can always provide documentation.
So just to make sure that I'm understanding you clearly, you are saying that already you do provide a detailed annual report.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and just again to make clear, you say detailed, is that itemized?
That's correct.
Okay, and does it have a detailed description?
Yes, including when it comes to expenditure, who is the vendor we're paying, what type of goods and services are procured. Yeah.
And if I could also ask, for special funds, are there any quarterly reports or any biannual reports that are done? Monthly reports, any reporting on special funds?
When it comes to special fund reports, we do submit the monthly special fund revenue reports, and this will be part of that special fund reports. And we also do the quarterly, and of course the annual will be it will be the audited financial statement.
So because this is an area that I'm not as familiar with, so with those monthly reports and quarterly reports that you're already submitting, are those itemized and detailed as well?
No, those are summary. So,
Okay.
But with this one, as required, a detailed quarterly, it will be a special report.
Are there any particular special funds where you do provide quarterly or biannual reports outside of the typical annual reporting?
Yes, there are a few senators.
Would you mind letting us know, at least the ones that you can think of now, which ones might have that additional requirement, and maybe what kind of size of funds we're talking about?
I don't have it on top of my head, Senator, but I will get back to you on that.
Yes, if you could provide that information, it would be helpful. Thank you.
Will do.
Oh, so in just following up with that, again, just so I'm getting as clear a picture as possible, and I appreciate you all for all of your time, I really do, and I don't want to hold you back too much farther. In order to generate reports like this, how much time does that demand? Would having a special fund that has the potential of earning maybe, or accruing, I should say, $80,000 to $100,000 potentially throughout the year, would there be a balance to the money that's coming in and then the time that's being expected to be spent on accounting for all of these details in a quarterly fashion? So you said that there are a few funds that have this extra consideration or this extra requirement. For a fund that might bring in $80,000, maybe $100,000 roundabout of dollars a year, would this be balanced? Would this make a lot of sense to spend that kind of time and attention and detail on a fund that makes about $80,000 to $100,000 a year?
Senator, probably with the anticipated revenue collection for one fiscal year, I mean, to me, it's immaterial, but if it is required by law, then of course we have to do it.
Yes, please.
I mean, really, with regards to any reporting, it's about the users of the report and who's looking at it and what they're hoping to gain from it. So, I mean, in terms of the amount of time, although at times it may take time, I think it's up to the body in terms of what they're hoping to get from that information, the detailed information. And again, I know, DOE, they spend a lot of time, working on various things. They have very important jobs. But again, it's really dependent upon the user, and so it's about balancing the time out with, I guess, the benefit from the report that's going to be generated. And that's, I think, upon contemplating the law and the bill and these amendments, that's probably going to be what's important to be thinking about, is really the users, who's going to be the users of the information, and what that information is going to be used for.
Senator Maasi, for providing those two considerations. I think, or not I think, but I do agree with what you were saying, that the usefulness and what they gain. Because if we're talking about quarterly reports, and I do like due diligence, but I also don't want to make things so burdensome that we're actually spending as much as we're accruing to be reporting. And so it seems to me that each quarter we might be accruing about $21,000. So I think that would be a part of our consideration. For $21,000, is the usefulness and what we're gaining out of that extra time being spent on a quarterly report, and then we can weigh out those considerations for ourselves. So thank you for pointing those two things out.
Thank you, Senator.
There being no further question, I'll now dismiss the panel, and I thank you, panel, for being here. The Committee of the Whole will recess until 4:30.